ride.
Want a lift?
Hey! Okay, dude, let's see what that jalopy can do!
What's a jalopy?
First off the line.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling pretty silly right now.
Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Megas. So this episode, Dude, Where's My Head, is actually, this is one of the few that I actually remember watching, and it's just a really, really fun episode. So, yeah, you remember how I said in the last episode that, that Coop apparently installed a mechanism that enabled him to detach Megas' head and drive it around remotely as a car? Yeah, apparently they decided to take it one step further and designed an entire episode around that, which is really, really funny. But, in case the episode actually opens up with Jamie playing with Coop with an RC car and pointing out that he's bored, and of course Coop points out that he's actually currently working on fixing up Megas' head unit and is trying to fix the car to make sure it's running in proper working condition. And Coop points out that Coop points out that Kiva wants it done for training and that he needs to have it done quickly. And of course, Jamie points out that he feels like all they ever do is train and they never really do anything fun anymore. But Coop then proceeds to point out that he actually kind of likes training. And sure enough, we see a montage where, yeah, they do train a little bit and check off things off the boxes, but in general, it's just a chance for them to just screw around and do whatever. And sure enough, several of the things Coop does involve him helping go crush cars as one of his field tests, blowing up buildings that are scheduled for demolition anyway and are therefore safe to destroy, mainly for target practice, and a couple of other really funny things. One of which I think is, I forget what he's testing, but he decides to just jump into the ocean at one point and just causes a huge water wave, which is really funny and really humorous. But in case, Coop points out that it'll most likely be fine, and points out that as so long as he stays on top of his training, that they'll actually be fine. But and of course, Jamie sarcastically remarks that it's not like that the Glorft will probably aren't going to attack. It's not like they have a robot specifically designed to attack them. And sure enough, what we find out is that what we find out is that the Glorft actually do exactly what Jamie just described. As it turns out, Gorath off screen has actually been designing a prototype, a mech based off of what little they know about Megas, and of course he's been having his top scientists work on it, and the end result is Mecha Megas, which is kind of like the Mecha Godzilla of the Megas XLR franchise, in that it's an evil counterpart of the titular main. Well, I'm not entirely sure if Godzilla can be considered a protagonist, but the main titular character of the series. And sure enough, Mecha Megas looks exactly like Megas, but only silver and with a bit of a Glorft design to it. So, and of course the engineer in charge of designing Mecha Megas points out that all Gorath needs to do is now pick a commander to actually go and ride around in it, and of course Gorath states that he's going to take on the Proto-Earther himself, and sure enough, he then that winds up being a thing where he winds up piloting a giant robot into the city later. But in case as Jamie and Coop are kind of talking about how all they ever do is train, Jamie actually sees a girl who walking on the street that we later find out her name is, I don't think she's named in the episode, but her name is Gina in the credits, so that's what I'm gonna call her. But in case, Jamie sees Gina walking down the street, and he admits that he admits that he kind of has a thing for her and points out that she's kind of cute, but also points Coop actually points out the very obvious thing that almost a month later, and Jamie hasn't said a word to her, and of course Jamie points out that he's just been waiting for the right time, and he can't really rush it, and but Coop quickly, very much realizing that his friend is actually into her, decides to actually make it look like Jamie is asking for a compliment on his hat, and of course he winds up hiding behind Jamie and shouting very loudly with, "Hey, how do you like my hat?" And then proceeds to retreat into the garage while Gina comes over and kind of points and kind of admires Jamie and asks him what's up. And sure enough, Jamie just kind of says hi back. And since obviously he doesn't since obviously it's implied, but and he later outright says this, but he hasn't gotten a date yet in like the entirety of the series or the entirety of anything. And Gina's like the first girl that's actually been properly interested in him. So things kind of go well. The two kind of hit it off a little bit until it becomes apparent that Gina is actually interested in Megas' head unit, which is of course a very cool car, and she mistakes it for Jamie's car, and Jamie realizing that he very much wants that it is indeed a very cool car, decides to go along with it and claim that it is indeed his car, but then Gina asks if they can go for a if she can go for a ride in it, and he says absolutely, he will be absolutely happy to, and then runs into the garage after Coop and tells him that he needs to borrow Megas' head, and of course Coop is very much Coop is very hesitant about the whole thing, but Jamie points out that he would do the same, and points out and asks Coop if he's always been there for him, and of course what we find out in the montage is that he has indeed not. In fact, Coop has been to a lot of the things that they promised to do together, and Jamie no-showed. And also, there's just a really humorous gag where he winds up going to Jamie's birthday, and even Jamie isn't there. It's just a really funny thing, but it just emphasizes how little the two of them actually hang out and are actually there for each other. So, but of course, Coop, even though he internalizes that monologue, internalizes that thing himself, does decide to give Jamie the keys anyway, and tells him that so long as he doesn't press the button, any of the special buttons, that he should be fine. And Jamie swears up and down that he won't, and proceeds to take the keys from Coop, and then climbs into the car. And what we find out is that Jamie actually isn't the best driver. What we find out is of course, Jamie doesn't really know how to drive. So first thing he does is almost run over Coop, and then proceeds to run up onto the curb after pulling out of the driveway because he doesn't turn tight enough. So Jamie isn't particularly the best driver, and Gina even comments on that because throughout their day he's frequently stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and he kind of blames it on the transmission, pointing out that it's supposed to do that because it saves gas. But he ultimately, Jamie is not a good driver, and Coop may have made a mistake lending him the car. And of course this winds up going from bad to worse, because right at that moment Kiva comes out pointing out that she's getting ready to start the next batch of training, and of course she quickly notices that the car is missing, and asks Coop what happened to it. And of course, Coop points out that he lent it to Jamie, and she becomes very obviously annoyed with him, pointing out that of course that's a very big problem because it actually is indeed also Megas' central control unit. So while they don't have the car, so they don't actually have the car back, and if they don't have the car, that's there could be an incident with the Glorft, and they're not going to be able to fight back. But Jamie, and also points out that there's something bad could happen in the car because it's Jamie and he doesn't know all the buttons. And to be fair, Coop doesn't know what half of the buttons do, but he does admittedly have, but he does point out that it should be fine because he turned off the interface. So Jamie shouldn't be able to access any of the buttons. But of course that does make Kiva feel a little better. But she also points out that they're going to need the car for training, and it's at this point where Coop suggests that he has an actual better way of actually training with her, and of course what his training winds up being is he actually winds up sitting down to play a video game with her, which she doesn't take seriously at first, but because she admits, Coop points out that she's not really trying, and she admits that she isn't because she thinks it's a waste of time. Until Coop kind of points out that he's more than happy to give her a girl handicap, and even points out that it'll actually go easy on her, and eventually, and after becoming offended because he admits to the girl handicap, she actually starts trying, and what we find out is that she's actually pretty good as a video game player. She doesn't do it often, but she's actually pretty good at playing video games. So yeah, she just kind of, so yeah, she and Coop just kind of bond while playing video games in an effort to train. But in any case, it's at this point where Jamie is actually trying to show Jamie around in his car, and sure enough, he starts kind of running through all of his things where he's not entirely sure how to actually impress her, because what we find out is that he's actually gotten all of his dating advice from Goat. So yeah, he doesn't really know what to do, but of course he just starts talking about himself and starts doing a bunch of other generally date-like things. And where he ultimately points out that and at one point Gina actually points out that it's a very strange setup inside the car, but Jamie points out that he's a very strange guy, and she openly admits that she thought he was a stalker, but points out that he's actually a pretty cute and nice guy, and Jamie winds up being very, very confused by that, but ultimately decides to agree with her. But yeah, of course, Jamie just kind of drives around, and when he notices Gina is bored, he actually decides to actually start talking about himself, which gets her kind of interested in him again. And also at one point, I mean, I'm just talking about Jamie's date a little bit, but at one point, he accidentally lets it slip that he fights giant robots and stuff for a living, but she thinks it's just his sense of humor because he plays it off as a joke. But yeah, he's not lying. But yeah, the date kind of goes a little bit sideways because obviously, as Jamie admits, this is his first date. Later in the episode, he admits that this is indeed his first date. So he has a bit of first date jitters and doesn't fully understand how to act around a girl. I mean, and specifically in a way that he's romantic with. He doesn't fully understand how to do that. But of course, it's at this point where Glorft actually shows up at Megas and starts rampaging through the city in an effort to find Coop. And also at one point there's this really funny scene where because Megas obviously looks exactly like Megas but silver. Of course Goat and Tiny see Megas and think it's actually Megas. So of course they greet Glorft like it's Coop even though it isn't. And Glorft just kind of looks at them through his monitors and is like, what is wrong with this planet? But in any case, yeah, Glorft actually just winds up rampaging through the city in an effort to find Megas, and once again we got another Pop TV gag where he winds up where one of the places he destroys is a Pop TV studio. So yeah, he winds up destroying one of the studios in one of the skyscrapers around Jersey City, and it just winds up being this really funny thing where it's like where they're in the middle of their thing where they're like we're Pop TV where music lives forever, and then the studio gets destroyed immediately after. But of course Glorft eventually gets annoyed that he can't find Megas and begins bellowing out loud where anything is and where Megas is and where Coop is and when he's going to come out of hiding. And of course Kiva and Coop both hear this from the basement, and Kiva goes to go check with with Coop taking full advantage of the fact that she left to just set her difficulty really, really high. And of course, after she checks, Coop accurately concludes that it is indeed the Glorft. So, but in any case, when they find out that the Glorft are actually attacking, Coop actually winds up releasing Megas from his mom's garage. But then Kiva points out the very obvious problem that Coop quickly realizes that he doesn't have Megas' head, and he realizes that now he actually has to he actually needs to figure out a way to actually control Megas, and of course Kiva points out that they're not going to be able to control Megas without its head, but Coop points out that's not actually entirely true, and then decides to actually just show her something he's actually been working on the off chance that he has to control Megas without a head, and sure enough, they then go into Megas and go inside of Megas, and what we discover is that Coop actually pulled out, or rather, I guess he installed a secondary command center inside of Megas. That's how he can use on the off chance that Megas has a head, and of course he points out that he's still working out the kinks and doesn't fully understand how to control it, but and of course this device is very much it is very finicky to use, as we find out. Coop quickly demonstrates how he's actually going to be able to actually control Megas, and picks up the controller, which what we find out isn't a particularly robust controller. It has a button, a dial that also functions as a button, and a trackpad. it has a little trackball on the bottom, and yeah, it's not particularly hands-on to control Megas that way because it's not as robust as the main one, and Coop does indeed demonstrate that very quickly when he points out that it's very difficult to control Megas because yeah, Megas doesn't. Yeah, it's a very difficult to actually control Megas the way it is because obviously the very limited control scheme means that Megas can kind of like tumble around, and Coop doesn't fully understand, and Coop isn't really able to fight at its fullest. So yeah, because of that, Coop isn't really able to control Megas all that well, and just kind of has Megas stumble blindly in the direction of Glorft and his new mech, and of course while Kiva actually winds up trying to contact Jamie and let him know that they need the car back, but of course Kiva actually can't get in contact with him the normal way because, as we find out, that because Coop turned off the control bridge, it also means that they're not going to be able to contact Jamie the normal way. So of course Kiva quickly realizes she's going to need to find another way to get in contact with Jamie, and quickly realizes that and quickly discovers that Coop actually has a ham radio inside the Megas control unit, and inside Megas is the secondary control bridge. So she asks Coop if she can borrow it and trying to get in contact with Jamie, and of course he says to go right ahead, but also points out that he's in need of a refill on some of his snacks, and asks Coop asks Kiva to also keep out for like a drive-thru or something so that he can pick up some stuff. But of course she immediately climbs out of Megas and on top of where Megas' control bridge would be, and then proceeds to actually pull out the ham radio and starts trying to contact Jamie, who plays it off as this thing that it's actually just this one station that he can't get rid of, and of course Kiva tries to get in contact with it. She tries to get in contact with him, but he just turns it off, and much to her chagrin, and she quickly realizes that Jamie isn't going to let them get into contact. But eventually they do get within sight of Mecha Megas, and finally, and this is where they actually coined the term for it, pointing out that it looks like Megas but as a mech, and of course then proceeds to point, and of course they quickly realize that they're going to need to actually deal with it, and that's going to be a problem because this robot is, as we find out, specifically designed to counter Megas. And of course Glorft finally notices that they're there, and declares that they're going to be no match for him, and points out that he's finally decided to show himself, and now he's going to defeat them with his newfound superior robot, and sure enough, he does, but not necessarily because he's good in his new robot and is good at fighting or anything like that, but rather it's mainly because Coop obviously is using a secondary control bridge and doesn't have the most robust control over it. Because as I said, it only consists of a dial, a trigger, and a little trackball. So yeah, Coop kind of struggles to fight against Glorft initially because he doesn't have his full weapon set and his full arsenal. He's unable to actually fight back against Mecha Megas because Megas is actually being handicapped by the fact that Jamie borrowed the car. So yeah, of course Glorft is able to successfully win and eventually manages to pin Megas down, and declares that now that he's finally won, he's going to finally take Megas back, and claims that Earth is finally his, and proceeds to pull out a freezing beam that winds up freezing Megas so that he can actually kind of return it back without any little hassle, and also possibly most likely kill Kiva and Coop, who can't really won't be able to stand the cold temperatures, and of course Coop quickly points out that quickly tries to actually free himself from the ice, but it's also at this exact moment where Jamie decides that Jamie and Gina decide that they actually want the convertible to open up, and Jamie of course doesn't know which button the actually opens up the roof, so he starts pressing buttons and accidentally turns the control module, the main control module on, which of course takes control away from Coop, and Coop then points out that now Jamie is in charge of Megas, and of course Jamie then starts pressing buttons in an effort to get the roof open, which of course causes Megas to just kind of go completely out of control and just cause general havoc to the nearby area. And of course, now this is Coop's fault. Of course, Coop isn't in control of Megas anymore, and he's trying to be. He's trying to get a secondary control bridge to get back into control and try and take control back away from Jamie. And of course that isn't working, and I think there's just this funny thing where it's just a series of extended shots where Glorft just sits there slack-jawed in awe as Coop just kind of rampages through the city, causing general mayhem, just destroying everything around him, and of course winds up destroying everything. Public roads, which funnily enough causes an old lady to drive in because she's not really paying attention. But and also a couple of buildings. And at one point, Coop just kind of. At one point, Megas just grabs an I-beam and starts smacking itself with it, which of course nobody is fully understands what exactly is going on, and of course Glorft doesn't fully understand what's going on either. Again, he's just standing there. He's just sitting there in his own personal robot, just watching all of this happen. He has no idea what's going on. But of course, Jamie eventually figures out how to actually get the sunroof open. But by this point, Glorft has actually finally recovered from his shock and actually sends Megas flying, and he winds up landing directly next to Jamie and Gina in the car, and of course Gina points out the very obvious thing about, hey, this is a giant robot. Jamie? Are you seeing any of this? And of course, Jamie, who has seen Megas before and knows full well that that's Coop inside, then points out that it's fine and that it's just Coop. And it's just this really funny juxtaposition where it's like she's obviously reacting to. She's probably the first person who's reacted oddly to Megas because of course everybody else has just been like, oh cool, Coop is a giant robot now. I guess that's neat. And Gina's the only one who has an actual rational reaction to Megas, which is, and I just find that kind of funny. But in any case, Glorft then stomps up and Megas and points out that he's had enough of Coop's foolish games, and points out that he's now going to take the prototype back and take over the Earth. But then he notices that Jamie and Gina are actually sitting in Megas's control bridge, and when he finds out that the car is actually separate from Megas, he then decides to actually chase after it and get it at all costs. And this of course causes Jamie to realize that he needs to get the hell out of there, and immediately pulls away in Megas's head, and as Glorft and to a lesser extent Coop and Kiva, because they don't really have much choice, because obviously Jamie is in full control of Megas. He's able to just control everything that the robot is doing, and of course Coop and Kiva have no choice but to come along, because they're just kind of stumbling in the general direction of the car, because that's where Jamie's going, and therefore that's where Megas is going. So yeah, and this just kind of winds up being a giant chase scene where Jamie tries to get away from Glorft, and Coop and Kiva just kind of blindly stumble through everything and destroying public property because they have no choice. And of course Jamie openly admits out loud that this is the first time he's ever gotten a date, and a giant robot has ruined it for him. But of course then he realizes he says that out loud and tries to backpedal on that. But of course the damage has been done already. So and eventually Jamie is able to actually pull inside of a parking garage while Coop and Kiva actually try to regain control of Megas, and of course Coop eventually just gets sick of his secondary control bridge telling him that access is still being denied and the override is still in effect, and he eventually just starts smacking the TV in an effort to try and get it to work. But of course, eventually Glorft winds up managing to corner Megas and manages to actually single-handedly defeat it in combat, because of course he can, and then declares that he's finally beaten Megas, and calls his Glorft commanders to actually bring in a salvage transport to capture Megas, and so that he can retrieve it, and of course shooters work. A giant transport thing just kind of snaps in place around Megas and just kind of tries to pull it away from Earth and into a Glorft warship. But And of course, Jamie sees all of this from the parking garage, and lets out a scream of concern for Coop. And when Gina asks him if he's a friend of his, and he of course points out that Coop is his best friend, and openly admits that he isn't the best person because he admits that nobody treats Coop that way except for maybe him. So of course, yeah, Jamie just kind of openly admits he's not the best person, and in truth, he isn't. He does a couple of things he thinks a couple of things in very early episodes where he is kind of a nasty person. He's not the best person, but in any case, Jamie quickly realizing that he needs to get Coop's control unit back on Megas so that Coop can actually fight back against Glorft and his Mecha Megas, decides to actually drive to the top of the parking garage, and then revs the engine in preparation to actually land on top of Megas. And of course, Gina tries to actually decide that she wants to nope out because this has been too weird for her. But of course, Jamie isn't really paying attention to her, and he then just drives over the edge of the parking garage as Coop and Megas are actually being lifted up and hoisted up into the air. And he does wind up successfully landing on top of Megas. But then he keeps going and winds up landing inside of Glorft's hand. And while Coop then does celebrate the fact that Jamie finally did something heroic, of course he winds up taking it back almost immediately when Jamie accidentally lands in the hands of Glorft and his robot. And Coop just kind of points out, oh well, he tried. That's all you can really ask, I guess. But yeah, in any case, after realizing that he didn't really mean to do that, and realizing that Glorft now has full control of the prototype, and Glorft even takes a minute to actually gloat about this fact, Jamie then decides that he's had enough and decides to actually run away. But he winds up trying to climb past Gina in the process, who hits a button that sets off what the show actually refers to as the robot's Ionic Disruptor cannon, or rather Atomic Disruptor cannon, which oddly enough winds up setting Megas free and also blowing Mecha Megas away. And because of that, Megas' head winds up landing exactly back where it's supposed to be. And now Megas is back in complete control of Coop. And Coop then proceeds to return from the secondary command bridge in his chair, and Kiva then follows shortly after. And of course, Coop takes the first opportunity to ask how the date went, and of course, Kiva asks if all of that was actually worth it for actually trying to pick up a girl. But in any case, now that he has full control of Megas, Coop then decides to finally deliver his trash talk, and sure enough, he lists all the things that Glorft pissed him off about personally: copying his robot, beating the shit out of him when he wasn't looking, and a bunch of other things that he did in the episode, and. But then Jamie actually interrupts at the very end, pointing out that Glorft almost ruined his date, and Kiva just kind of interrupts him tells Coop to just kind of finish Glorft off already. And yeah, it's just this really funny thing where Coop just kind of goes off on his rant, and then Jamie just kind of interrupts, but Kiva points out, that's not really a big reason to be mad, is it? And yeah, of course, now in complete control of Megas, we quickly find out that Mecha Megas is actually in no shape to actually fight back, and sure enough, it's not able to actually handle Megas at its full power. Of course, it was able to handle Megas when it was just blindly stumbling around, destroying shit, and isn't able to actually fight back in a really controlled way. But once Coop is actually in control of Megas, it quickly becomes apparent that it's actually no match for Coop at all. So, yeah, and eventually, Glorft does eventually decide to fight back, because obviously Coop is just kind of punching it over and over, and has it against the ropes and against the building, and is just punching it, and of course eventually Glorft just kind of shoves him away with one of Mecha Megas' weapons, and of course decides that he's had enough, and points out that he's going to finally do what he should have done a long time ago and finally finish Coop off. And Coop then points out that he's right there with him, and the two of them decide to shoot corresponding laser beams. Obviously Mecha Megas has copied some of Coop's weapons, and sure enough, what we find out is that one of them is just a headlight laser. Basically Megas' headlights are able to just shoot lasers now, and And of course, the two of them are equally matched for the most part until Coop winds up turning on the high beams, and then it winds up being absolutely no match for Megas' headlight beam. And sure enough, this winds up disorienting Glorft enough that Coop is able to perform a double deuce on him, ripping off both of its arms, and then uses one of those arms to bat away Mecha Megas' control unit, with Glorft swearing over his intercom that he'll be back and that he'll one day finally get Megas back and destroy and to capture him and defeat Coop. But Coop then turns off the monitor and pointing out that he hates that channel. But of course they then proceed to point out that once again, that if trying to take the car was actually worth it to impress a girl, and of course Jamie and Gina then proceed to both throw up because they've actually been through quite a lot, and have actually gotten a bit of motion sick and just start throwing up, and Kiva just kind of reluctantly concludes that the two of them are perfect for each other before sitting back down, and Coop decides to actually take everybody for tacos, which only causes Jamie and Gina to actually start throwing up more. And sure enough, in the final sequence, we find out that Coop is actually going to go off, and he's taking the long way to go get tacos. He just walked into the ocean, and he's just going to go find some tacos with I don't fully understand the context of the scene, but I think Coop is going to actually go and get some actual tacos. He's going to go to like where the source is and goes to go get some tacos or something. But of course this winds up. That's where the episode just kind of ends. So yeah, the important thing to take away from this is that Jamie is never allowed to borrow the car ever. That is what the episode's takeaway is. Jamie should not be allowed to borrow the car. Basically the only reason Coop lets Jamie borrow the car is because Jamie asked him nicely, and Coop said yes, and because it's his best friend, and of course Jamie just kind of winds up taking the car with him, and winds up going to go fight giant robots with it unwittingly, of course, but of course Jamie uses it to try and pick up a girl, and that winds up handicapping Megas because, of course, Megas' entire control unit is installed in the car's dashboard. Of course, that's going to cause problems at some point, and of course, I think the takeaway is that Jamie's probably never going to borrow the car again. Or at least he's not going to be allowed to borrow the car again, because Kiva obviously isn't going to let him borrow the car again, because that wound up being a disaster. And but yeah, I did like this episode. This episode was fun. I do remember this episode from when I originally watched the series back when I was a kid, and it's still funny today. It's just this really funny thing where they reattached it, where Jamie winds up borrowing the car, and this winds up causing widespread problems because, of course, Megas isn't able to fight at its full capacity. And I do kind of like that little premise of it, where they just took something that was established in the previous episode, and then decided to do a whole episode dedicated around that idea about, hey, what if Megas' head is just away from the body for an extended period of time while the Glorft are attacking? And that is basically what the premise of this episode is, and I do kind of like that idea. But, in any case, yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below if you want to keep up to date with what's going on the channel. Twitter is actually the best way to do that. I don't post updates often, but I also just post memes and retweet art and a bunch of other things. So you should go follow me over there anyway. It could be fun. But yeah, finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is actually the playlist for Courage Month, the previous one of these that I did. So if you want to go see that, by all means, link is once again, link is on the end screen. Go check that out. But hey guys, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.